Well, hello there, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the second part of Update As Above, So Below, a fan-made update that I've brainstormed for the naval mode of War Thunder that introduces submarines and aircraft carriers into the mix. Most of the information I'm presenting in this video is pulled from uboat.net with a smattering of Wikipedia. If you haven't been to uboat.net, definitely check it out. It is a great resource for all information on U-boats. And they're even starting to expand out into the Allies' navies and whatnot. Very great resource. I can't recommend it enough. In this video, we'll be discussing submarines! Yay! Now, compared to aircraft carriers, submarines are rather straightforward with how they would work. Whereas with carriers, you have a multitude of existing mechanics coming together to make a single carrier work, a submarine is literally just a tube that can raise and descend, fire torpedoes, drop mines, and requires air. Can't get any more straightforward than that. There are historical accounts of submarine crews bagging larger surface vessels outside of the regular merchant ship. HMS Ark Royal, sunk by U-81. Shinano, sunk by Archerfish. Indianapolis was sunk by I-58. On the same side of the coin, submarines litter the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans from all of the navies. Mostly Germany. A lot of their U-boats. Oh god, the Atlantic has so many fucking U-boats. But the precedent is there for both aspects to be repeated in-game. But where do we begin with submarines? I guess their first point would be their defensive capabilities. Part 1. Dem Guns. Now, obviously, there isn't a lot of room on a submarine to mount a lot of armament. For the most part, they are armed with one, maybe two primary deck guns of various types, depending on which nation you're looking at, and what the time frame is. These deck guns are primarily meant to sink smaller vessels that the submarine had intercepted, bombard shore emplacements during a raid, or hold out against surface combatants if the submarine is forced to surface. When it comes to anti-air protection, they run the gambit depending on which nation you're looking at. These guns are primarily mounted on the conning tower in one form or another, although some designs have a dedicated AA platform for these. With Americans, they typically mounted 30 caliber, 50 caliber, 20mm Oerlikons, and 40mm Beaufort cannons. So overall, a pretty standard American anti-air armament you'd find on all their vessels in game, although it's just in a smaller amount. It's not filling the sky with lead like the 4th of July. The Germans primarily had their 20mm AA cannon, just like the one you'd find on the Whirlwind or the 1944 version of the S-100. I think some U-boats even had that exact same quad 20mm mounting you'd find on the S-100. In addition to the 20mm, you have smaller guns and single or double mountings, these most likely being MG42s or MG34s, depending on where you're looking. Both websites I used for this script couldn't quite give a clear indication. I think some U-boats even had a 37mm, but I don't know if it was the rapid fire like on the 6.2 AA truck, or if it was the single fire like you'd find on some destroyers. I couldn't tell you. The Russians, though, straight up, if I had to be honest, they weren't fucking around with their AA armament. They mounted everything from 7.62s to 37mm to 45mm autocannons for AA defenses. They weren't fucking around. In contrast, the British were very sparse with their AA defenses. Usually one or two, maybe three Lewis guns, and the occasional single or pair of Oerlikon 20s. Keep in mind, this is in addition to the deck gun, so it would seem that the British really clung to the idea of not being engaged by an aircraft at all. Because if a British submarine was, it really isn't going to have a chance to use its AA guns to tell an enemy pilot to fuck off. The enemy pilot's just going to be like, haha, a Lewis gun, die. With the Japanese, though, they weren't finicky. They weren't fucking around quite on the level of the Russians in terms of caliber, but they were fucking around in the terms of amount. Interwar examples like I-13 of the Type A class of submarines boasted 10 Type 96 25mm AA cannons. 10 25mm AA cannons. I'm going to let that sink in for a moment. This is also in addition to the 140mm deck gun, keep in mind. Just 10 of these. It's insane. However, following the likes of I-13, the amount of AA armament would fluctuate from boat to boat in the following years. The Japanese were even donated the U-boats U-511 and U-1224, so either of these could make an appearance as a premium within the tech tree. Ooh, fancy. The Italians, looking into their submarine classes, they were very consistent with AA armament, as most of their submarine classes were defended with 13.2mm machine guns. Although the Acciaio class was the only example to carry 20mm, but we all know how Italian 20s are. If you look at some of the tanks in their tech tree, yeah, I'm primarily thinking about the AS-42. Italian 20s aren't the best. But we move on to the French, and they seem to have bounced between having one machine gun or one machine gun and an AA cannon, though the armament was consistently a 13.2mm as well, or was added to a 37mm cannon. In the case of Surcouf, she was absolutely bristling with AA defenses compared to her French counterparts. In addition to the iconic pair of 8-inch cannons that Surcouf mounted in that turret, she carried two 37mm and four 13.2s, absolutely bristling for a French submarine. So, to say that a submarine, depending on the class and nation, can't defend itself from an attacking aircraft for a brief amount of time, is hearsay. It would provide enough persuasive anti-air fire to make an aircraft turn away, so that the player can slip away and survive a bit longer. Although, if that enemy pilot is really determined in getting the kill, it's gonna get through. Ah, but their survivability is horrible, you say. It'll crumple like a tin can the moment a bullet pierces the hull, or a depth charge causes flooding. Part 2. I will survive! Yes, you're not wrong. After a certain pressure, depth, or amount of damage sustained, a submarine would crumple and sink. However, the idea behind a submarine is to not be seen. Unlike a surface combat vessel, where you can be seen and tank some damage for a while in an engagement, submarines require a different approach to their gameplay. Shock, horror, gasp, oh my god, thinking differently in War Thunder? It can't be! You would still be required to attend to fire control and damage repair and water control, but that's only if you allow yourself to be detected and engaged, and if you manage to slip away fast enough to lick your wounds. Submarines require a cautious and slow approach to engaging a larger threat. You go in guns blazing, you'll be ripped apart by a player's secondary, tertiary, or even primary armament. On the other side of the coin, you take it slowly, you take it smartly, and the enemy won't even know you're there before it's too late. But submarines are slow underwater! Well, duh. You're running on battery power and the water is resistant. Water's wet. It is resistant to a submerged object. Oh my god. Part 3. Hauling ass. While surfaced, a submarine can haul ass at a fairly decent rate. In-game, this would be helpful in a player's approach to a match. Submarines they would be spawned, surfaced, where they have a greater speed, and therefore allow a player to scramble to where they want to be in order to descend and begin the hunt. Let's look at the Gatto class of submarine from America. On the surface, a Gatto class submarine can sail at 21 knots, or 39 kilometers per hour, or 24 miles per hour in freedom units. The moment it is fully submerged and running on battery power, that 21 knots drops to 9 knots, or 17 kilometers per hour, or 10 miles per hour. Low to mid-tier tanks go at these speeds, okay? Keep that in mind. There are tanks that go these same speeds, and players don't have a fucking problem with that. A decent surface speed would to get away or arrive at your hunting mark, and a slow speed underwater to allow time to observe the situation and ready yourself for the hunt. But what about keeping submarines in check? If we're keeping carriers in check, submarines need to be kept in check too. Part 4. Counteractions and air. In-game, we already have depth charges and mines, but they are practically useless in the current environment of naval. There has only been one time in all of my time playing naval where I was killed by an enemy player that had spammed their depth charges. And that was after they had rammed into me, scraped alongside, and just hit the drop button to dump their depth charges under me. Now, aside from a one-off depth charge kill every now and then against a surface vessel, both armament options have little to no use. That's because their intended targets aren't in-game. I can tell you now that most of the vessels I play that can carry depth charges and mines or either or, they aren't on board at all. They're just liability risks. They are external ammo racks that raise the risk of being sent back to the spawn menu. Mines are used to close off certain locations on a map, while depth charges are meant to either force a submarine to surface or cripple it enough for it to succumb to natural pressures while underwater. To further assist in their use, sonar or ASDIC, the British equivalent of sonar, and surface search radar would have to be implemented onto vessels that carry them in real life. Destroyers, subchasers, patrol boats, etc., the natural enemies to submarines. Much like the radar scope on screen for some vessels, another scope could be added to give sonar readings for a destroyer player to hone in on. Another scope could be for surface search radar, which would allow a player in a cruiser, for example, to detect something and warn their teammates of, hey, there's a fucking submarine over there and it's off my scope. Go over there, go hunt. Once the alerted teammates arrive to the indicated area, the game of cat and mouse would begin. This would either end in the submarine avoiding depth charge patterns and getting away and crippling or killing somebody, or the destroyer, or whatever goes after it, makes the waters a bit safer. Another aspect that would prevent a submarine from staying concealed for an entire match would be an oxygen meter. Think back to Battle Stations Midway and Battle Stations Pacific. Submarine units in those games would have to resurface away from targets to top off their oxygen tanks before slipping back underwater. In those games, oxygen lasted for, 5 minutes, if I remember correctly? In the case of War Thunder, this could be extended to roughly 10 minutes, but that's it. I don't want German U-boats to have their snorkel equipment, which would just be fucking broken. For those who don't know, some mid to late war German submarines were equipped with a snorkel device, which allowed it to take in oxygen while the periscope was looking up on the surface. In War Thunder, that would be bullshit. A oxygen meter would be the start of a cycle that not only ensures a submarine player is aware of what's going on with their vessel, but it would to make sure that they are aware of what's going on the surface through the periscope so they can check and be like, okay, I'm clear, time for oxygen. But what about the maps? Oh god, here we go again. Part 6, fucking maps. Surprisingly, the maps we currently have in game would work just fine for submarines. They would be giving a new spawn zone that sits between the coastal and blue water zones. However, at the moment the maps are shallow and are only deep enough to allow a vessel to slip beneath the waters once it's taken out. The maps would need a rework to allow new underwater terrain features and depths. If a submarine managed to get into a coastal bounded area, most, if not all, coastal vessels have depth charges or mines, and their armament is sufficient enough to smack around a cheeky submarine. Essentially, submarines, while able to wander into deeper and shallow waters and cause havoc, can be kept in check no matter where they go. And that's not including the danger of air attacks, which in turn can be fended off like I mentioned in part 1. Going back to battle stations again, one of my favorite views while playing a submarine mission was watching something massive like a cargo ship or a battleship sink into the depths as I sail past my submarine underwater. There's just a grim satisfaction of seeing something so fucking massive being sunk by something so small. It is just, yes, I killed you. Now you sink. With enduring confrontation, submarines would have a field day in the aspect of having so much open space to sail on the surface. They can either engage targets at range and being one-shotted, or they can sail along, figure out where they want to go, and slip beneath the waves to be a menace that must be hunted. It would also give scout planes a secondary objective to look for submarines and direct hunting vessels to their last reported positions. Overall, submarines are essentially another glass cannon like aircraft carriers. They're dangerous when left alone, but fragile when discovered. Plenty of other vehicles in game fit this description as well. Look at the BT-42 and KV-2. They're effective, very effective at what they do, but they are large targets that present a big danger. It must be eliminated before anything else. But where would submarines sit within the tech trees? Hell, I forgot to mention this in the last video, where would carriers even sit? Part 6. The branches. Let's take a look at the tech trees for Japanese coastal and blue water tech trees as an example. At this point in the video, switch over and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll give you a couple seconds to do just that. So here we are with the coastal tree. For submarines, they share many of the same armaments that are seen on coastal vessels. Machine guns, autocannons, a large deck gun or two, plus torpedoes and mines. Their survivability is practically on par with coastal vessels also. It really doesn't take a lot to kill them. In the case of some Japanese submarines, they would be unique. Some had a hangar on board with an aircraft or two, sometimes 4, depending on the class. So that could be pretty interesting to witness. You see a Japanese submarine surface, launch a scout plane, and then it just slips back beneath the waters. Ominous? Yes. Creepy? No. Fun? Hell yeah. The I-400s carried the Sirens, the M6As? Oh yeah, those look awesome. It would be awesome. Using the pictured coastal tree here, as you can see I've edited it, a submarine branch could easily fit snugly within the tree. Some nations had coastal and ocean-going submarines, but in the context of War Thunder, coastal submarines would not be introduced, as most had no exterior armament to really defend themselves with. It's in the name, they're coastal submarines. They were only packing torpedoes. The Japanese did have a nifty cargo submarine called the Maru-U, but it lacked torpedoes because it was a cargo submarine, but had plenty of defensive armament. However, it just wouldn't work. It'd be kind of pointless to have a submarine gunboat, if you really think about it. Post-recording Tetra here, I was just listening back through the audio to see where I can make edits and make it more smoother, and I got to the point where I mentioned the Maru-U, the Japanese cargo submarine that only had defensive guns, and I say the line that it would be pointless for there to be a submarine gunboat. I changed my mind on that, because that would actually be pretty funny to watch. You see a teammate or even you are out there in the coastal area, this itty-bitty little cargo submarine pops up from underwater and starts lighting you or your teammate up with its defensive guns, and then just slips back beneath the waters to rinse and repeat. That would kind of be funny. If you just imagine it, that would honestly really be funny. Because then it's just a case of where the fuck did it come from and where the hell did it go? And is it going to hit again? That's funny. I find that funny. Going over to carriers in the blue water tech tree now. Japanese blue water only has about 2 1/4 branches, so there's plenty of room for aircraft carriers to be slotted in, as you can see here. A carrier or two to match a battle rating would help fill in gaps that would otherwise only be occupied by more destroyers or cruisers. As you can see, they can be done. It can all be done. I made both of these videos for a reason. Not only for me to at least make something and be productive, but to show that, at least mechanically, in-game carriers and submarines have their pros, their cons, and different playstyles, which is coherent amongst all the vehicles in the game. Each vehicle is different in pros and cons and their playstyles. Out of every major type of naval vessel to be produced and represented in game, carriers and submarines are the last two, at least the last two major types, to be represented. I truthfully feel they could offer new approaches to naval gameplay and allow new ways of tactical thinking and future-proofing for carrier and submarine players. Because who knows the amount of teamwork that could be accomplished to hunt down a rampant submarine or an aircraft carrier who is, dunking on your team. Well, the same could be applied to your team, helping keeping a friendly flat top alive and drawing fire away from them, or helping a friendly submarine stay alive. Like, a submarine player says, "Hey guys, I've been caught on surface search radar. I'm trying to get away, but can you please draw their attention away from me so I can reposition?" Who knows? At the end of the day, again, who knows where naval forces is going from here? Yes, introduction of these two vessel types would need some, reworking, some overhauling, some, just general upkeep to allow them to thrive. But we could very well see both vessels in-game one day on PC, if not sometime soon, then later down the line. Because if they don't come in, we're going to be stuck fighting surface artillery duels against them, and that's going to take forever. Now, there is a solution that someone mentioned that, should these later battleships come in, they're going to be raising the BR bracket. And that could mean the use of jet close air support, which have all these guided munitions and whatnot. And truthfully, at the time of brainstorming this fan-made update, I really didn't consider jets in the mix because that's just gonna be hell as it is. The BR brackets are gonna be so fucked for CAS or for naval when they get up to higher BRs. I'm not looking forward to it. That's another concern of mine that just now cropped up. Oh god, I'm not doing a part 3. Don't worry, I'm not doing a part 3 to this. This is only going to be a part 1 and part 2. But now I'm even more worried about how things are going to be later. But Jesus Christ, do we need a fucking answer to them? Whether it be jets or, submarines and carriers. Because as I stated in the introduction of the first video, they are coming. And God help us, we need a fucking answer. I'd like to thank you for hanging out and listening to me rant and ramble for 2 whole videos. Subscribe for more if you want more. And give this video a thumbs up. Give it a like. Share it amongst your friends. Get it out there. As a up-and-coming, hopeful content creator, sharing it helps. You guys have a good day, good night, or a good whatever wherever you are. I'll see you around for the next video.